Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Looks over the middle, second guesses, fires, throws. Does he make the catch in the end zone? Yes! Touchdown!
Oladipo to win it.
Another one!
He got
Another
it!
one!
Oladipo!
Another one!
Huge hole. He's at the 30. He's going to go. 10, 5, touchdown, Jonathan Taylor.
Galloway finds Rob Finnessy, who fires the three, and
He hit it.
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome aboard another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you from the high atop the 18th fairway, the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, brought to you by our great friends from Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Make sure you just go to andymoorehonda.com, where you can find the best in new and used vehicles, and Endeavor Hospitality and their Wow Club, assortment of restaurants in and around the Bloomington area. Great places like BB's Market, who is your butcher, baker, no matter where you live. Great place to stop in, and I'm going to have to maybe make a couple trips there this week. Maybe do a couple shows there. I was not able to do our show there last Friday. I had a doctor's appointment. How's everybody doing today? Hope everybody's having a good start to their week. Looks like the guys are hitting at it early and often on the commenter on the Andy Moore Honda hotline. Appreciate that. Hope everyone had a great weekend. I know if you're an Indiana basketball fan, you did, because Indiana won their third straight Big Ten game yesterday. We'll talk about that, of course, as Don Fischer joins us today. Dustin Dopirak will also be along. So looking forward to that. Hey to everybody on the Andy Moore Honda hotline. Fred, the Easton Assassins on. Forrest, Kevin. Dave G. How are things down in Florida? That's right. A lot of Bengals fans. They're happy. Wow. They took care of business on the road. We'll talk about that as well. Kenneth on board. Fred. Larry. 5 lefts. These are people hitting us up on the Andy Moore Honda hotline. What you can do as well. Hit us up on the YouTube portion of the show. It's where most of the comments come. You're free to do that. Make sure you subscribe and hit that like button if you do. John Boy, I see you're online. How are you? How was your weekend?
I had a good weekend. Very relaxing. Good to see Indiana stay in the win column for men's basketball. So things are good on a Monday. Lots of, and then we also saw that Bob Bostad, I can't think of how to pronounce it, got introduced for Indiana football. That's exciting. Got an update on everything that was going on in the transfer portal with him and Tom Allen, and how he's gonna, how Bob Bostad, is gonna improve the offensive line and the run game. So that's exciting as well.
Let's see. We'll look at the box score for yesterday's game. Indiana, very impressive. We'll talk about that. How they're playing right now is very impressive. Trying to make sure I don't miss anything. Any comments? Over here to start us off, Sean's on as well. I'll come back and hit these questions. He says, honest question, I love race, but how do you mess with our starting lineup right now? Now, see, guys, I've asked this question. Remember, once his team started playing well, I said, what happens when these guys come back? I think you saw Race Thompson can play yesterday, but he's not ready to play. I mean, in 4 minutes of play, he had 3 fouls. He was averaging a foul a minute. But it's good for, I think, the mental health of people, of the players, to see him out there, I guess. Bates was absolutely, Kevin says Bates was hot from the 3-point line? Yes, he was. We'll talk about that.
Didn't Tamar Bates's baby win the halftime baby race as well?
Oh,
Saw something
absolutely.
about that.
Absolutely. I'm surprised we don't have that. Yeah. There's not really anything to show other than you can show a video of it, but that doesn't do very, very good for radio, does it? Shibatory 66 says IU went from the Washington Generals to the Harlem Globetrotters in the span of a players only team meeting. He ain't lying. We're going to talk about that. Kenneth says, unfortunately, it takes him out of his routine, and the show will be done well before he's back. I'm not sure. He must have to do something. I hate that, but that's okay. You can listen to it anytime. For those of you listening on radio, how's everything going on our friends down on the river with the ref? WREF, always the right call. WBRO, Marengo, as well as soon to be WJOB up in the region and Chicago. Trace Jackson Davis, what a game he had yesterday. And if he can continue to play this way, Big Ten Player of the Year, that I was going to send a tweet out, but Big Ten Player of the Year had all been already given up to
Zach Edey,
and Trace Jackson Davis can change that because he is right now. If he could continue playing that way, he could win Player of the Year easily. He's just been more dominant than Zach Edey. Although, if you look at the averages, you'd probably have to look over the last 3 games. Obviously, he wasn't that dominant when they were losing. But something happened in a players-only meeting that he led, or was one of the leaders. But he has been dominant. He's averaging 28 points. I was running the numbers last night. He's averaging 28 points a game over the last 3 games. He scored over 30 points twice. It doesn't happen very often. And Indiana, as I said, for Indiana to win, Jordan Geronimo, Tamar Bates, Trey Galloway, one of those 3 has to have a good game every game. Yesterday it was Tamar Bates and Trey Galloway, both with 17 points. If you look at the numbers, what Indiana did offensively, you're not going to lose very often when you put up 18 3-point shots and you hit 50% of them. When you shoot nearly 50% for the game and you get 24 free throw opportunities and you hit 88% of those, which Indiana did. Ironically, Trace Jackson Davis, Indiana missed 3 total free throws yesterday. Trace Jackson Davis missed 2 of those 3. They were 19 of 24 or whatever, 21 of 24. 21 of 24 of the free throw line. It made a huge difference because I don't have the stats pulled up in front of me right this second, but I know that Michigan State missed a bunch of free throws, and they were also like 4 of 12 from the 3-point line, where Indiana was 50%. So the 3-point shooting and free throw shooting, in addition to Trace Jackson Davis, of course, having a was it 31 and 15 and 5 blocks. Let's not forget that. And his 5th block tied him with Jeff Newton as the all-time leader for blocks in Indiana. His next block will make him the all-time king. Lots of other things going on over the weekend and Don Fischer will be here to talk about the games. Dustin Dopirak will be here to join us. NFL football, man, the playoffs.
Brett Maher
happening.
missed another PAT. The Cowboys kicker.
It's unbelievable. That's 4 in 2 weeks. 5?
He had 4 in a row in the game against whoever they beat last week, and then one against the 49ers this past week. The 49ers one was blocked, but if you look at the trajectory of where it was going, it wasn't going to go in.
That's unbelievable. I can't believe that dude has a job.
No, he did. Now, last night's game or yesterday's game, he also knocked in a couple field goals. But they lost anyway. 49ers going to the NFC Championship or whatever it is.
Well, he won't have a job with the Cowboys next year, I would ascertain.
Yeah. I mean, it stings to see people go through little ruts like that. But, I mean, you're an NFL kicker. You have one job. It's to put the ball.
Yeah, you had one job. You had one job. How about that? You had
what
one
about
job. You had one job. Yeah. I'm trying to pull up the scores.
From the NFL?
Yeah, being a little slow for me yesterday.
So the Niners won 19-12. We already talking about that one. So the 49ers advancing to the what is it called? NFC Championship game, excuse me. And the other one, Bengals took down the Bills 27-10. So next week in the conference championship round, we will have the 49ers and the Eagles playing for a spot on the NFC side of the Super Bowl, and the Bengals and the Chiefs playing for the spot on the AFC side. So Bengals, the only team from last season that has a chance to go back-to-back Super Bowl appearances, I should say.
You mean the Chiefs?
No, the Bengals were in it last year. They lost to who did the Bengals lose to last year? Was it the Chargers or the Rams?
The Bengals were in the Super Bowl last year?
Yes. Joe Burrow.
Wow. Amnesia.
Who did they lose to, though? I can't think of who won last year's Super Bowl.
You know what? I don't even
Let's take a look. Oh, it was the Rams. Crazy. Yeah, they beat the Rams. Rams beat the Bengals 23-20 last year. So Bengals looking to go to their second straight Super Bowl.
And the Bengals looked awfully strong going to Buffalo and winning.
That's right.
Shuffled off to Buffalo and won their defense. I was watching some of that game. Looked astounding. We got to take a break. We got lots more coming up here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. The great Don Fischer joined us. Coming up next, you're listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by our good friends from Go Team and Endeavor Hospitality's Wow Club. Make sure you go there, sign up for the Wow Club, start earning Wow rewards today. You can pick up Go Team at places like BB's or GoTeamBites.com. Back with Don Fischer right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Good morning, Don. How are you, sir?
Good, Jimbo. How are you?
Good.
Did you fire Dustin?
No, his schedule keeps jacking him around.
He works for I don't know what it's called. Outsider, but it's like a part of On3, and On3 is the part of his schedule that's been getting screwed up, is what he's been telling me.
Really?
Yeah, because they're in charge of Outsider.
I know. But I didn't know he was doing any On3 stuff.
Well, so Outsider is now affiliated with him, is what it is. Because they're affiliated with him, On3 controls his schedule. That's how that works for him.
I don't know what Outsider is or On3 or anything. What are they?
On3 is a new. It's kind of like Rivals or 24/7. It's kind of a.
It's just an online sports, online sports website that this guy started. The guy that started Rivals, who then sold Rivals and then started 247. He sold 247 and is now starting another new one. He's done it 3 times. I'm like going, well, it's obviously a recipe for success, but yeah, it's funny.
Interesting. I don't know how do you guys, how do bloggers, is that what you call yourself, a blogger?
No, that's someone who just puts out like a self. They just put out
So what is yours,
right.
a podcast? Is yours a podcast?
Well, no, we have this is a radio show on this side because we're on, the station in Evansville radio station. Then this is sent out on YouTube as well, but it's separate from Indiana Rivals. That's just its own website. There's a couple guys that cover the stories and do all that, and it has subscribers. And it's like it's a news outlet with 4 writers and that covers certain aspects of everything.
Gotcha.
30 seconds.
Patterson and Rogers in Bloomington offers a variety of freshly made fare, tying their roots in Limestone with their love of Southern eateries. With quality, local, and organic food as their main focus, Southern Stone strives to always provide their guests with an exceptional dining experience. With weekly specials, quick, attentive service, Southern Stone Restaurant provides delicious 5-star comfort food with a Southern charm at 2-star prices. Southern Stone Restaurant is part of Endeavor Hospitality's Wow Club.
This segment is brought to you by Southern Stone Restaurant. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you here on this Monday. Thanks a lot for joining us. The great Don Fischer, voice of the Hoosiers, with us now. Brought to you by our friends at Southern Stone Restaurant, where tonight at 7:05 you can find him and Mike Woodson for Inside Indiana Basketball. And good time to be there because the Hoosiers are rolling, Don. They've found the magic that was missing, and something that I saw yesterday that even adds a little something else was emotion. They seemed to play with emotion yesterday on top of playing with better defense, but the emotional outlet or example I hadn't seen. And yesterday you could see they were playing with emotion in addition to with purpose.
I think the word you're looking for is passion.
There you go.
And I say that because it was brought up to me by a good friend of mine who was a basketball coach at the college level. And I won't mention any other names other than that, but this guy said, what I saw missing in those 3 losses that they had prior to this 3-game winning streak was passion. There was no passion in those 3 losses. There was like, we're just playing basketball. It's not that important, that kind of thing. Well, you're right. I mean, what we've seen here in these 3 wins is a return to a passionate want to win, number 1, and a belief that they could, number 2, confidence level. And the third thing, I think, in that sense, is the intensity at the defensive end of the floor. I mean, honestly, that was what was missing in those 3 losses, in my opinion. And part of it was because of the Race Thompson injury that put the second starter on the sidelines. I think when Indiana suffered that loss of Race in the Iowa ball game, you could see that things just kind of went away. It was like they lost their passion or their fight or their belief. And then they play Northwestern and just get clobbered by them at home. And then they go to Penn State and get beaten by them at Penn State because they couldn't play. They weren't playing any defense. It was that simple. So all of a sudden we've seen a return to that. Well, how did that happen? Well, obviously the coaches had something to do with it. And there was a players only meeting that had something to do with it. But all of a sudden we've seen a return of guys playing hard at the defensive end. And interestingly enough, The Wisconsin ball game was the first game that it felt that way, that they kind of took over a ball game defensively, even though it was a 21-20 halftime score, go on an 18-2 run to start the second half. And that kind of springboarded it to the Illinois ball game. And then Mike Woodson has to call a timeout in the first 2 minutes of the ball game because they go out there and look like the team that we saw against Penn State or Northwestern. They just weren't playing with that same level of passion or whatever defensively. He calls a timeout literally I think it was just 2.5 minutes into the ball game. And whatever he said, obviously it triggered something because these guys went out, and from that point on, it was ball game over just about. I mean, obviously Illinois played tough and gave them some problems as the game went on, but you could see there was a difference in how they were playing. They were executing the game plan. And that's what has turned this thing around. And then yesterday against Michigan State, same thing. Play really tough at the defensive end of the floor. Jalen Hood-Schifino is not himself in that ball game. It obviously got in early foul trouble. That was part of his problem. But then as the game wore on, I think he got kneed in the thigh. I don't know what the injury was exactly, but he did not play his best. Trey Galloway steps in there as the point guard in the second half for the most part and just played tremendous. And Tamar Bates comes off the bench after back-to-back games of not scoring a single point and knocks down 17 with 5 3-pointers. So you're seeing all different kinds of things happening with this basketball team now. But the most important thing is a return to the passion of playing hard.
Absolutely, on the defensive end, and that comes from everybody. I mean, I know Trace Jackson-Davis, and deservedly, gets a lot of attention because he's scoring 30 points every other game. But the defense is what changed. And I asked the guys in the press conference, and we'll hear from them later, but and Mike as well. I'm like, what was it? There was a change between the 3 losses and the 3 wins. This is not the same team. And he just said that they weren't working as hard. We had to work harder. I had to be more demanding. Practices had to be harder. And they've responded. Well, they have, because this team is not the same team. Plus, he said that, and it makes more sense now, because it did sound like excuses when they talked about losing Race and Xavier. But he said that when they lost Race, they were so shell shocked, and it just took them a minute to get over it. But that looks to be truthful now, because it's like, wow, they didn't know what to do, and which is, I don't know if that's a great thing or not to have, but they have returned, and to play like they are playing right now as one of the better teams in the conference without X and Race is only a good sign for things to come, I believe.
I agree with that. There's no question. And I think Trace Jackson-Davis has taken on an added leadership role with this basketball team. I don't think there's much question about that. I guess he was the instigator of the players-only meeting. Well, I don't know what came out of that, because they kept that in-house, and I don't know that anybody really knows what was said in that meeting, but he was the guy that called that meeting of the players only. And it would indicate to me, in the way he is playing right now, is basically, here's the thing. There were games this year and games of late, not in the 3-game losing or winning streak, but in the losing streak and other times, the ball wasn't getting into Trace a lot. I mean, he wasn't getting as many shots. He wasn't being the focal point of the offensive side of the basketball. And let's face it, your best player needs to touch the ball every time down the floor. He doesn't have to shoot it every time, but he's got to be a factor that make people believe that, look, this is the guy we got to guard. Illinois didn't guard Trace. I mean, they guarded him one-on-one the whole ball game, which I think was a huge mistake on Illinois' part, because what's the formula for keeping a guy like him not as effective? Well, you double team him. You make sure he can't get it. If he does get his hands on the ball, he's got to kick it outside. Well, Illinois didn't do that. They decided to go one-on-one. What happened? He scored 35. And then yesterday, he scores 31. Why? Because they didn't really double either. They dug down on him with guards and things like that. He went past 2 of them, like 3 or 4 different times. He went right by 2 different guys and slammed it home. I mean, it was amazing how hard he played. And that's another factor. Trace Jackson-Davis playing as hard as he's playing right now and doing it consistently That's what we needed to see from Trace in his entire career, because that guy has always been one of the most talented guys on the floor, if not the most talented guy on the floor. He is capable of dominating games like that, and he's done so here recently because teams have allowed him to go one-on-one. That isn't going to happen if you're going to play against Trace Jackson Davis. He's going to beat you.
Well, no, and what helps, or what Indiana has to have is, and I've said, a great game or a good game from either Tamar, Trey, or Jordan Geronimo, game in and game out. One of those guys has to step up. Yesterday, it was two of them with Trey Galloway and Tamar Bates, which gave great hand, because obviously it wasn't a great day for Jalen Hood-Schifino, going only 1 of 6 and having 2 points. But as long as Indiana is getting support from somewhere, somebody, and Trace is playing like Trace, they're going to be fine. And like you said, Trace is his passion that has rediscovered is amazing, because he has been dominant. I mean, he is just, I watched him play. I'm like, nobody's stopping that. He's just dominant.
There's no question that Trace is the biggest factor right now, but there are others. Jordan Geronimo, Malik Renew have both started to play some of their best basketball this season. I think Geronimo, how about Miller Kopp yesterday? There's some chippiness going on in this Michigan State team, and I'm going to tell you that I believe Michigan State thinks they can bully Indiana, and they have thought that for some time.
I think everybody thinks they can, because they hadn't shown that toughness they needed to.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, Indiana is no longer taking any BS from anybody. They're basically standing up. Miller Kopp did that yesterday. He got right in the face. Was it Sissoko? I think it was Sissoko. I don't know what happened there, but all of a sudden they're nose to nose with one another, and Miller Kopp is having none of whatever the Maudie Sissoko is saying to him. And likewise, Geronimo did the same thing down low one time yesterday. I mean, that's the kind of passion you've got to play with. I do think the word is passion that this team has to play with if they're going to play their best basketball. And we're seeing it in these last 3 games. We have seen that passion, that want to win, that belief that they can win. And it's turned this whole season around. And incidentally, Trey Galloway yesterday playing the point as effectively as anybody we've seen this year. That's just another great sign of the growth of this basketball team. And Galloway, to me, is a guy that just needs to shoot the ball more than he does. He doesn't look for his shot very often. And when he does, he knocks it down. He's hitting over 50% from the 3-point line and like 55 or 56% on the season from the field as a whole. The guy is just a terrific basketball player. He's smart. He understands the game. He plays with passion all the time. He's the one guy you could say always plays with passion when he's out there. He may not play his best all the time, but he plays with passion every time he's out on the floor. He busts his butt, and you got to love that about this kid.
Absolutely, because you have to have someone that keeps that fire lit, because it's easy for it to go out on a team, and he is definitely the guy that keeps that going, and has been called a glue type guy for this team, and he's really growing into that role.
Right.
17 points yesterday. You mentioned 3 of 3 behind the arc, 4 of 4 at the free throw line, and that's another thing. Yesterday at the free throw line, Indiana 21 of 24 for 88%. And if you look across the way at what was Michigan State, they left 9 points on the board, because they were 19 of 28. And I promise you, Tom Izzo is not happy about that today, because that went a long way in helping them lose that game.
Right.
And a long way in helping Indiana win that game.
Yeah. I mean, all I can say at this point, and Jim, I think this is the biggest factor, is Indiana needs to play with that intensity level. If they do what they've done here in the last 3 ball games the rest of the season will take care of itself. This team will be successful. It doesn't mean that they'll win a championship. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be beaten or play a bad ball game here or there, but they've got to play with that passion, with the toughness that they have showed here in these last 3 ball games. They don't have to take a backseat to anybody. they can play with anybody if they play that way the rest of the season. And that's all you can hope for at this point. And you don't want to lose it this week because you've got a Minnesota team that's very capable of beating you. They beat Ohio State on the road a week and a half ago. Not that they're a great team. They're not. But they are certainly a team capable of winning if you don't go out and play your best basketball. And then you got an Ohio State team that has had Indiana's number a lot over the last several years. And Chris Holtman's done a great job with that program. And even though they've had a bit of a struggle this year, they bounced back as well. And it's going to be a test when Indiana faces them. But Indiana could easily have a 5-game winning streak going into the following week, as we know, which will be a really important one.
It's funny you say that, Don. I've got that very thing written down. They've won 3 straight. I've got, it should be 5, because the only reason I don't have 6 is because after that they have to go to Maryland, which Maryland is beatable, but it's winning on the road in the Big Ten is always tough. That win at Illinois is very, very impressive, because not only did you get the win, but you did so in a dominant fashion. Ohio State, like you said, they lost 5 straight. The Big Ten has been like that this year. You look at Iowa, they start the season losing 3 straight, but then they go and win 3 straight. And you've had Indiana do the same, lose 3 straight. Now they've turned things around. So we've seen so many teams turn it around, and Ohio State is a good team. They're one of 10. They're one of, I think, 10 teams in the Big Ten that is potential to make the NCAA tournament this year.
Yep. I mean, it's this league has a lot of parity in it. There's no question about that. And the fact that they beat up on each other is kept a lot of these teams out of the rankings, but they're still getting a lot of votes. So there's no doubt a lot of people think this league is really the best league in the country.
It has certainly grown up to that. Tonight at 7:05, you'll be at Southern Stone Restaurant. Make sure we're back online. Everything is back on the schedule, right?
Yeah, we're back to Inside IU basketball with Mike Woodson on Monday nights.
Perfect. So stop out to Southern Stone. I'll be out there checking things out as well. Don, I hope you have a great day. Look forward to seeing you tonight.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it, man. See you.
You bet. The great Don Fischer, the voice of the Indiana Hoosiers, joining us here on Indiana Sports Speed Radio. We've got lots more. Back with it right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Golfers, here's the deal.
All right.
Yeah, I'll give Kopp his toughness yesterday. But here's the thing. You still got to frickin' do something offensively. Why he's not alleviated of his offensive duties? His only points came on a dunk, by the way.
I saw that.
A baseline dunk that was kind of nice and shocking.
We got about a minute, and it looks like Mr. Dustin Dopirak is in the green room.
Hold up. Maxine's got thoughts.
Good morning, Dustin.
Good morning. Good morning. She's apparently awake too, and apparently there's some reason for concern in the neighborhood. To her, anyway.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm certain it's nothing major. It's probably just the guys who work next door in the house all the time, on the neighbor's house all the time. But
30 seconds.
She's got thoughts about it. Anyway, I don't know. Maxine, calm down. I will move if this continues into the.
It's okay. Do what you got to do. If you need to mute yourself for a second, if she's going crazy, that's fine. Jim, are you coming back?
Fresh and mouthwater. Stop by Feast Market and Cellar today.
This segment is brought to you by Remax Advanced Realty, Indie Home Pros team by Cheryl Sizemore. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you here on this Monday, brought to you by our good friends from Remax Realty. If you're in the market for a home in the Indianapolis area, you need Cheryl Sizemore, and her 2 decades of experience could be the difference between you getting the home you want or not. Reach out to her, Cheryl at IndyHomePros.com. Dustin Dopirak from the Indy Star. How are you, sir?
Doing well, Jim. How about yourself?
Cannot complain. How was your weekend?
Good. Well, I was still getting back from out west. So got back yesterday landed about 4, got home about 5:30, somewhere in that range. So missed a lot of interesting stuff yesterday, but I checked the IU box score and I'm very intrigued. But yeah, fun week for me, much less fun week for the Pacers, as they are 0-7 since Tyrese Halliburton's injury.
Is it 7 now? I knew they lost 6, but man, and this has all come since Halliburton's injury and since he's gone down.
Yeah, no, they obviously lost the night that he did get injured, and since the way that Rick Carlisle put it on Saturday night was, they have to develop an identity without him. And that they haven't, basically. There was at least some trends in the right direction. Saturday was at least a competitive game in Phoenix. Now, part of that was because Phoenix was missing even more important guys than the Pacers were. With Chris Paul's been out, Devin Booker's been out, DeAndre Ayton was out, Jay Crowder has been out, Landry Shamet has been out. Basically they've had a tough go of it, obviously, just because they've been dealing with injuries and other stuff. And so the Pacers were fortunate enough to be competitive in that game because they were dealing with a very shorthanded squad. But Pacers still, Suns still got enough out of the guys they've got left to get it done, and the Pacers just haven't been able to do that. They haven't been able to really kind of put together a formula for winning, without Tyrese. And it's a problem because they do have other good players, between Buddy Hield and Miles Turner and Benedict Mathurin. There's enough talent there and enough solid other guys that they should be able to get a win. They haven't been able to. At least there was a step in the right direction. They played some defense on Saturday, and they had some big issues there in the previous games. Tyrese Halliburton is not a great defender, so you shouldn't be a much, much worse team defensively without him, but they have been, and it's been an issue, but they've at least addressed that on some level on Saturday, and I think they might be going somewhat in the right direction, but still down to 23-25. They were well above 500 when he got hurt. They are well below 5, or not well, they're 2 games below 500 now.
Well, as well as they had played, which was a shock, a surprise, because no one expected them to be a top 8 team. No one expected them to be a playoff team. But yet they had just gelled together, were playing extraordinarily well together, and the young talent was playing. They wanted to win, so they were. I'm not surprised to see this but now I'm like, okay, are fans a little happier though because they're losing? Because at the beginning, people kind of wanted them to be on the Wembanyama train. That train is probably.
That's
already left the station, but this is probably sending them helpful back in the direction fans thought that they were going to begin with.
Yeah, maybe. And that's the thing, is figuring out, like, it is a pretty good draft. There is some level of depth to it, I think. But I don't know. I don't know who you're looking at and saying, well, that guy takes you to the next level. I mean, because they're not getting. You got to presume they're not getting Wembanyama, because I mean, you have to I think if they lose out, if they were to literally lose their last 40 games or something insane, and now that would be a big, huge issue. Not 40. I mean, if they were to drop their last 35 or so, that might still not be enough to get them the most ping pong balls, even if they just totally bagged it from now on. I mean, the Rockets, I think, have lost 13 in a row, somewhere in that range. I think they're 10-36. So I think the Pacers rose themselves high up enough that even if they just decided to totally bag it, they're probably not still getting, Victor Wembanyama. So it's like, okay, after that, where does it make sense for you to try to be as far as, accruing talent for next year? If you decided, okay, you're just a lottery team at this point, where you're going to be. I mean, you're still going to be in the back half of the lottery. So, I mean, I don't know that it makes sense to, totally pack it in. It's really the place they're in now is that you have to move Turner if you're not going to sign him. It's got to be, it's one of those two now that I think there was, when you were looking at them as a potential playoff team, there was still a benefit in keeping him, riding it out with him, and letting him walk if he wanted to. If you could still get that team across the line, get them in the playoffs, get them the experience of being in a series, get them to know what it's like. Because I don't think you can make it without him, frankly, unless you got to have a big return and get a big man that you can trust. I mean, I got a lot of respect for Isaiah Jackson and Jalen Smith. Without those two guys, though, they don't have a real big man that they can win with. Those guys are good coming off the bench. Smith might be able to get back to being a starting 4-man at some point in his career. But right now, you can't win consistently with one of those two guys as your main 5-man. And so they need Turner if they're going to get anywhere. And then I think, again, they could have been, and they still can be. I don't think you ruled them out yet. But you're more likely in a position where you're in a play-in round if you're going to get in at all. And it becomes, I think, more difficult to justify keeping him around if you're going to lose him. I think it was hard to justify already. It's harder now. And so it's definitely a situation where you either got to get the contract negotiations done or close to done by February 9th, or you're going to make the move. I think that's kind of what this losing streak has put them on, is that it is more imperative for them to determine what they're doing with Miles Turner by February 9th than it was before.
A couple of big home games coming up, although they have the Bulls tomorrow night. But I'm looking forward actually to Friday when Mr. Antetokounmpo. See, she likes the Bucks. When
she does. Really, the Bucks game she's feeling good about.
See, she's a Bucks fan. Antetokounmpo comes to town. What's bigger, Antetokounmpo coming to town, or 2 games later when LeBron James comes in? Although Milwaukee is a playoff team.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly, obviously you're seeing these issues where guys are, especially at this point in the season, you're getting the load management issue, and Giannis has been dealing with some injury, and Giannis didn't even play at home when they played him on Monday, basically. So they ended up just dealing with Drew Holiday. And I think the Bucks are still a fine team without him, because I think Holiday's really good, and you kind of forget how good of a player he is. And they've had, Middleton hasn't really been healthy. But it's, I mean, if right now, is Giannis the better player? Yeah, because LeBron James is 38. But LeBron is still, I think he's more likely.
If you were going to go see a game, which you all know you'll see both, but if you were going to see a game, which one of those 2 games would you rather go see?
If I'm only going to see one, I want to go see, and if I haven't seen either one of them, I want to see LeBron, because I think that's, the big issue being you have, he is still a fantastic player. And
it reminds me of the line from Moneyball when Brad Pitt is talking to who was the guy that came over from the Braves to Oakland?
David Justice. Yeah.
He says, I don't want you, or I'm not trying to get the player that you once were. I'm just trying to get what you have left out of what you have.
Right.
Kind of reminds me of a LeBron type of thing. You're
Yes,
not going to get the
LeBron
LeBron
James
from winning the 4 world titles.
Yeah. But the actual physical player, just watching him individually, he is way, way better at 38 than David Justice was at 38 by a lot. No, I mean, individually, he's still special. I mean, obviously they played them out in LA, and I got to watch him up close. And It's still like, really the bigger issue for them is just they can't take advantage of the talents that he has. I mean, they don't have enough shooters to take advantage of the passes that he gives them. He sets them up with gold sometimes, and you're just like, you threw that to a guy who can't make that shot. Kyle Korver, you don't have Mike Miller anymore. Or Ray Allen certainly, but even somewhat lesser shooters to knock those down when it's just he's posting somebody up and he's whipping something no look out of the post in the corner, and that should be a 3 and it's not because somebody doesn't hit it. I mean, he's probably not. Maybe he's not a top 5 player, but I think he's still a top 10 player. I mean, it is not fully by like lifetime achievement award that he's going to get the most votes in the All-Star game. I mean, he's still really, really good. So the thing about it is that like, if you haven't seen LeBron James yet, if you haven't seen him up close, you got to presume there's only so many more years you can do that. And you should try if you can. Now, the flip side of that is that, again, load management is a thing. And Pacers fans have been burned this year already, and they've been burned before. And they definitely feel like they're a B-list city that nobody wants, that basically everybody targets them, as, since they're not on national TV almost ever, that's going to be a night where, like the superstars are going to sit out when they have the opportunity. So, but if LeBron is going to play and Giannis is going to play, I mean, like right now, is Giannis the better player? Yes. But right now, if you haven't seen LeBron James yet and you can, then that's the one you want to see. But again, I can't tell anybody what to do with their money because you can't trust it. I mean, there's this big discussion about all this, and it's tough because I mean, these guys are putting a lot on their bodies. I mean, a lot. And especially the way the game is played now, how fast it is. I mean, it's a track meet every single night. Like you're not, like you got to run a lot. You get in these games, and it's like, like no one's walking the ball up the floor and playing, 15 minutes of half court basketball. It's not happening. These guys are running, and they're running all the time. And, like doing that 82 nights a year and then playoffs takes a toll on you. And if you've been doing it for 20 years, like LeBron James has, you need some nights off. You just do. I mean, I'm only a couple years older than him. And I know, like, shoot, if I had to do that every night, I'd be exhausted. And I keep myself in halfway decent shape. The rest of us could not do that. And so we talk about them like they're just assets and they're just entertainment pieces. And how can you let your superstars sit out when there's some 10-year-old and, I don't know, like Lafayette that's driving down and wants to see LeBron James. Like, I mean, how can you deprive that kid of that? And it's just like, okay, like, yeah, but these are physical bodies, they wear out. It's real. So it's tough, but like if I were guaranteed to see LeBron or I were guaranteed to see Giannis and I had to pick one or the other, I would want to see LeBron just because there's only so much time left. And also LeBron is going to be close to Kareem's record. We're talking, next so many games. It's like he'd have to keep up a really big time pace to get it by the time they come to Indiana. And so I don't know that he's going to get that. But he's going to be close, so like you're going to see
which record?
Last game, Kareem's scoring record, all-time points.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he's right there. So, I mean, again, probably he's not doing it in Indiana, and probably if he's close to doing it in Indiana, he's probably not going to want to do it there. But it's close. You're going to see him in the days prior. If he's going to come out and play it in at Gainbridge. So again, it's a tough deal. It's like if you're a fan that does not have a ton of disposable income, and again, I couldn't suggest anybody roll the dice. I had a friend text me, when the Warriors in town, like a friend of mine ended up coming to the game, and basically he was asking me like an hour and a half before, like, do you know if he's going to play? And like it wasn't until like I was in pregame, like watching Steve Kerr, and I was because he wanted to have his son come watch Steph because he loves Steph, and he was like, well, I don't want to drag him there if he's not going to play, and like I just so happened Kerr said the Curry's going to play tonight, and I texted him. He's like, okay, we're getting in the car, and they were up in Zionsville, so it's like, or Carmel, and so it's like, okay, like that's kind of where you are. If you're on the outskirts, you almost have to wait until game day to decide if you want to come to a game to see some of these superstars.
We got to take a break. Dustin Dopirak from the Indy Star is with us. When we return, I want to talk about college basketball. Indiana, of course, with a gigantic, not only just a win, but the winning streak, but the Big Ten looking good. the top 25. Who's going to be number one? Lots of questions, lots of stuff to talk about. Dustin Dopirak is with us, brought to you by our good friends from Barbara Pop Real Estate Services. For those of you that live down in the Louisville, Southern Indiana, Floyd, Clark, Harris, and Scott County areas, if you're looking for a home there, Barbara Pop has served those communities for 3 decades. Make sure you reach out to Barbara at barbarapop.com, or our friend Matt Lincoln, Matt at barbarapop.com. We're back with more Dustin Dopirak right after this.
We'll be right back to the golf club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Andy Moore.
All right.
I think this is the most wide open college basketball season that I remember.
It's up there. You know, the other one that was really wide open was the one that didn't finish. I think
COVID,
2020. I definitely went into that tournament thinking anybody can win this. This is a wreck, and of course, we never really got to it. So I remember thinking most of that year, like, no one's going to win this tournament. You know, like everybody that rises up falls. And I think Baylor was in pretty good shape, obviously, when the season ended, and Kansas. But that was definitely a year where I was thinking something similar, that it's really wide open. But you're right, this is probably more so. I mean, I think there were at least a couple teams that had risen to the top by the end of by the time the pandemic ended everything. And you know, this year it's all over the place, and obviously the teams that are at the top, you just keep thinking that there's something wrong there. You know, like because it's like, you're right. I'm just looking at the rankings now, and obviously I haven't thought about it as much as I would normally. But I mean, yeah, Houston lost to Temple. Like, you know,
Kansas got crushed and lost 2 in a row,
and lost to Kansas State. You know, Purdue's 16-1, but you just keep having that sense that, like, all right, like, they're really, really good, but you know,
they're getting by. They're getting
by, and that there's going to be a team that comes up and beats them. You know, Alabama. It's just wild to think of Alabama as a potentially number one team in basketball. But
it's like you're having my exact thoughts as I looked at that. That's exactly what I thought, almost verbatim, all the way down through there.
Yeah. And UCLA lost to Arizona and got beat pretty handily. You know, Gonzaga lost a home game. You know, that doesn't happen.
They don't play any defense, apparently.
Yeah, apparently not. I mean, like, they haven't. I mean, when you don't play anybody, you know, like, you don't see that many great players. You know, like, defense is less of a thing, because you're like, well, you got Timmy and, you know, Strother and all those guys, and just throw it down into them, score a bunch of points, and, you know, that'll be enough.
Now, Xavier, if they hadn't lost to DePaul, they would, because they jumped up 4 spots last week, they would be jumping up again, which would be hilarious. Not hilarious, but
pretty wild, yeah.
And that's because that's going to be a great win for Indiana on the road.
Yeah, it is
over them. But that just tells me that Indiana, playing like they're playing now, without Xavier and Race, can actually play with. They could play with Arizona and Kansas, at least on a neutral court. The way they are playing right now, I think.
Yeah. I mean, like, given the right situation, I still don't think they're a Final Four caliber team. Like, I just don't.
Decision fatigue. You pick your plan and pick up at BB's Market with no extra charge. So leave the heavy lifting to us and enjoy healthy eating with stocked meals in your fridge. Order online today at thefreshfork.com. Fresh Fork is a proud partner of WOW Network. This segment is brought to you by Feast Market and Cellar. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back. Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Monday. Hope you're having a good one. Dustin Dopirak from the Indy Stars with us. Yesterday, Dustin, Indiana won their 3rd consecutive Big Ten game after losing 3 consecutive Big Ten games. And they lost to Iowa after giving up a 21-point lead, but that was the game they lost Race Thompson. And Mike had talked about having lost those two starters before and how it's affected them. And granted, there was no doubt that you knew that, of course, it affects your team. I got your starters for a reason. But it was the words when they lost Race Thompson, he talked about the team was shell-shocked. And nothing has made more sense now looking back at that, because they had a 21-point lead.
Yeah.
And they just froze. They were shell-shocked and lost that game. And that will come back to hurt them, I think, still, no matter how good the rest of their season goes, because that's a loss. And this conference is, when you look at Purdue, it only has one loss right now, and you've got 4. You got a lot of catching up to do, and that's a big difference. But it was just how they were losing, and it's like they were sleepwalking through games. And then we talked about the unbelievable change and turnaround. And Don Fischer was on with us earlier, and I asked this question to Trey Galloway yesterday, and actually we'll hear from him. And I asked Mike Woodson, and I brought it up to Don. But what the thing I saw yesterday, even not in these other 2 games, but it was emotion. They were actually playing with emotion. And I think it was led by Trey Galloway, but Miller Kopp, I got to give him credit for that. He doesn't do a lot else. I don't think he can do a lot else. So he's going to bring some moxie now, which is fine if that works. If that's part of the winning success for that team,
sure.
Hey, whatever works for him, because you look at if you look at the stat sheet, of course, while Jalen Hood-Schifino didn't have a great day, 2 points, he took 6 shots. He just didn't hit his shots. Miller Kopp, though, on the other hand, 1 of 3, and I'm pretty sure all 3 of those shots came in the second half, and one that he made was a dunk, of all things, a baseline dunk, which I was like, who was that? When I saw it, I'm like, who was that?
Every once in a while, he surprises you taking the ball.
The having to play with, he's being forced right now to play tough. He wasn't. None of them were, but right now he's being forced, and that's one of the things that he can do. I guess is like, hey, all right, I can be a tough guy if they need that. But I think that in itself will help him become more offensively minded,
right?
Because it just drives you. He's just not. He doesn't seem to be driven to score in any way, because you look at other guys that come off the bench that get off. Tamar Bates, for one. I mean, my God,
Tamar's looking for
17 points off the base.
I mean, and a big part of it is just being able to create your own. I mean, like, Miller can do some things off the balance, but if he's going to drive in a straight line. I mean, there is some wiggle to Tamar Bates' game. He's capable of crossing you up and of jab stepping and of doing something that, if he has a defender on him, can get enough space to get a shot off, where Miller Kopp is not quite as good at that piece. Bates is better at that. And Bates is just more wired to look for those opportunities. If you just cross somebody up and do a fade or a pull up or whatever it's going to be, Miller Kopp's less interested in that. And they have not done a good job, I don't think, of just drawing something up and saying, like, we're going to run Miller off of 2 screens, and he's going to run baseline, and he's going to come around, and someone's going to find him. But another piece to it, obviously, is a lot of times that he has gotten shots, it's gotten out of just doubles from Trace, and I guess no one's going to double team Trace Jackson Davis anymore. They're just going to let him score 30 points every night.
Well,
is that the decision that the Big Ten has made?
Yesterday, I was watching the game. Michigan State started out double teaming Trace, but then they went away from that. But when you've got 2 guys that are scoring 17 points, that are knocking down, what were they from 3 combined? 5 of 6 for Tamar, and I don't think
they were 8 of 9.
He didn't miss a shot. Yeah, he didn't miss a shot. Yeah. So when you get 2 guys that are shooting 90% from 3-point line and they're just putting up that many shots, you can't double team him. And that's the thing that Indiana has not had. They have not had an offense that that forces teams to do what Indiana wants them to do.
That's true. Yeah.
And by hitting these shots, they are. And that's why I say that every game, either Trey Galloway, Tamar Bates, or Jordan Geronimo, they have to have a good game. Somebody has to draw some attention away from Trace Jackson Davis. Jalen Hood-Schifino, you hope he has a good game, but regardless, he's going to be on the ball. He's going to be running things. So, you're going to have to. That's why Miller Kopp having some offensive output would be nice, because it takes a little pressure off of Jalen Hood-Schifino right now without having X of having to score, having to run the offense, having to do all those things. That's why Miller Kopp. That's why
this man frustrates you. I can tell. He personally, his lack of shots bothers you personally.
It does, because you look at Jordan Geronimo. He got off 5 shots.
In
Trey
13
Galloway,
minutes.
In much less time. He only played 13 minutes. He gets
I
off
got
5
fouls in a tech. What was that all about? I was flying for most of this. I didn't see this. What? I mean,
that's a second technical for Jordan Geronimo in a matter of weeks, too, by the way. He got the
what is going on? That was
pass to the referee.
That was one thing that really stood out on the stat sheet when I looked at it after, because I haven't really had a chance to rewatch it because I'm on the plane most of the time.
Oh, they just chippy instead of just separating stuff.
Officials I get it. It happens.
Like to do.
I mean, I mean, obviously, it's clear that someone else. You can't live on Trace alone. I mean, you like even when he's got 30. I mean, 30's. Here, why am I off? Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. I got kicked off for a second there. But no, I think it is obviously critical that it's somebody else. I mean, it doesn't have to be the same person every night. Preferably, it's not the same person every night. But you need at least 2 other guys to score the basketball. And obviously on Sunday it was Bates and Galloway. It's not always going to be Bates and Galloway. I think in the previous game it was Geronimo and Hood-Schifino. So you obviously need somebody to take some level of attention off. Now, I mean, if I was a Big Ten opponent, I would still dare someone else to beat me. I would still throw 2 bodies at Trace Jackson Davis as much as possible and say, you're not getting 30 off me. I don't care. I'm going to presume that, like however good Bates and Galloway or Kopp or whoever might be shooting that night is that day, that he's not going to kill me all day, or I'm going to find a way to double off of Geronimo or Thompson or whoever it is at the 4 and scramble and whatever and live with whatever they get. I mean, like, again, when Trace is that good, I mean, they should be a tough cover. Like Indiana has enough talent that it should be a tough cover. But if I'm an opponent, I'm still thinking, okay, like I'm not letting Trace get 30. Like I'm just not. I'm presuming that's my worst possibility. And I'm going to, if Bates and Galloway beat me because they knock down 8 threes, I'll live with that, because that's not what the scouting report says is going to happen. And I'm going to trust that at some point they're going to miss those shots. Like I can those wide open and I'll be fine. But yeah, it is a much better deal when they are getting those kinds of contributions. And I still think Bates has a chance to be really, really good. And so it's cool to see those flashes when he's going. I mean, I think like I understand the shell shock piece to it, but like there was still way too much talent on that team to get beat the way they did initially after the injuries. I mean, like they weren't playing defensively as hard as they should be. There's enough defensive talent even without Thompson and Johnson to be okay. There's definitely enough offensive talent. I mean, again, if you would have told me, I like, as much as Race is heart and soul, from a pure talent perspective, he was in a way the most the guy that you could lose, because you had Geronimo and Renew behind them, and I was thinking those guys were going to be fine, and they weren't. They didn't get nearly as much production from those guys as I expected, and so it's obviously big for them that you're seeing those guys finally step up. Geronimo in particular, Geronimo stepping up and being the guy that we know he could be, that we've already seen. Like we talked a lot about this summer about whether or not he was going to be a 3 and make that leap to being a guy that you can put on the floor with Thompson at the same time. And he hasn't become that guy, but at least he should be a guy that there's not drop off when Thompson steps off the floor. And you're finally seeing that again, and that's a big deal. But there definitely is They are more emotional. Woodson's apparently, based on what I've seen from you guys, Woodson has apparently really got after this team, and he needed to. That strikes me as clear that Slynn needed to step up in that regard, and Mike Woodson did. So I think the complaints that he wasn't getting enough out of them were fair. And I think you got to give the go on the other scale of that and say like that since then he obviously clearly saw a problem and worked on it and made sure that this team is coming with more fire than it did in those previous losses.
Yeah, and now they even though Purdue has gotten out to such a jump on winning the league, I lost my
everybody else. It's a crapshoot for second place in the Big Ten. It could be anybody.
Oh my! There are how many teams that are at 4-4 right now, which is what Indiana is. There's like 4 teams, I think, and Indiana's tied for 4th or 5th right now, I think. 2 weeks after being tied for last.
Yeah. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 teams between 3 and 5 losses. Like 11. That's incredible. That's absolutely nuts. So there are 2 games separating 2nd and 12th in the Big Ten right now. And Ohio State's 3 and 5, and they're in 12th. And there's a lot of talent on that team. They're
Ohio State. Okay, Ohio State is my Mendoza team on the NCAA tournament.
Yeah,
I know they're good enough to be an NCAA tournament team, but they've that's an ugly loss to Minnesota at home.
Yeah, yes it is.
And they're 11-8 already. It's like with a lot of Big Ten games to play left. So I think that Minnesota loss may end up screwing them. Of course, you take Nebraska out, Minnesota out. Maryland is the other team, but they're 12-7. They're 9-1 at home, but they're 1-5 on the road.
It's possible. Like you look at it right now, and like you can you're looking at a lot of
10, spots, baby.
What's up?
I think 10 Big Ten teams right now are looking at the tournament.
I mean, they could be. I mean, now obviously a bunch of them can fade and they're going to play each other, so they're probably going to knock. Some are going to knock each other out of it. But I mean, the thing about it is that Purdue's the only one that you'd put on a top 3 line right now. Like maybe top 4. Like you might not get.
That has changed, and that has changed in the 2-week period. I mean, Rutgers was looking really good. They were on the rise, and then of course they lose, which
they lost a couple.
It's expected to be, what's going to happen in this.
I mean, Rutgers is going to get in just on grinding the daylights out of people and making basketball feel like an absolutely miserable pursuit. And they'll get in that way because they'll win enough games playing that way.
This league is 2 shots away from being the most convoluted league you've ever seen in your life, because Purdue, they won at Ohio State barely, and they barely beat Nebraska, didn't they?
I think so. They barely beat they barely beat Michigan State,
but they've got the wins instead of not having. But just think if 2 of those don't go their way, then they're 5-3. Then now we're looking at 5-3, 5-3, 5-3, 4-3, 5-4, 4-4, 4-4, 4-4, 4-4, 3-3. I mean, this league, it is balanced beyond any year I can recall, and it's going to be strong. They're going to be, I think, 10 teams will make it into the tournament.
It's possible. I mean, it's tight. It's going to be one of those that, again, like they're going to beat each other up. And then so you're going to look at that at the end and say, okay, well, how good are they? You're definitely going to look and say, well, this is a better league than I thought it was.
It probably gets to 9.
Everybody's going to be right around the same. And, it all depends on how that's going to look. I mean, you're going to be looking at net rankings, and I haven't looked at those. But that's really going to tell a lot of the tale as to what ends up that way. I don't know that there's another super conference in there that you're looking at and saying, okay, well, you got to get in as many teams from that league because they're clearly overperforming. Like you don't like the ACC is not particularly strong by its standards. It's probably going to get 4 or 5, but not some crazy number like you've seen some years in the past. I think the Big 12 is going to get a bunch in, but there's only so many teams in the Big 12. You're probably looking at, you're definitely looking at K-State, Kansas, Iowa State, Texas, TCU, and Baylor as sure things. After that, they're kind of up in the air as whether Oklahoma State or Oklahoma get in, or West Virginia has a chance, but West Virginia's 1-6 in the league, so they're probably not. Big East will probably get several here. Just trying to look through these, but there's going to be opportunity for the Big Ten. It's just not going to be a very, someone's got to make a move if they're going to get on a high line, and Indiana's in a position to do that. I think Indiana is in a position. They have that win over Xavier that looks really good. That the win over North Carolina doesn't look as good as you would hope, but it's still a win over North Carolina. It's still going to be something. And so it's like you just got to pile up as many wins as they can, and they can end up being the second highest seeded team coming out of the Big Ten.
But, and I said 10 has a shot. I ultimately, I think 9 will get in, but
yeah,
saying that, and look at the net rankings real quick. Of course, Nebraska is I don't know where Minnesota is. There must be further down. Haven't even got to Minnesota yet, or that far down, and I'm at 120. All right, I'm not going any further down looking for them. I'm not going to worry about it. But I did see, who did I see a second ago that was far down there? I believe it was Nebraska.
Right now, Indiana is the second team in the net. I didn't know that. Indiana is the second Big Ten team in the net, behind Florida Atlantic. But they're ahead of Rutgers. They're ahead of Ohio State's 24th, despite being 11-8. So they've got some, out of league wins.
Wisconsin is 64 and Michigan is 77.
Well, Michigan didn't start out well. You got to remember that. Michigan lost some games they weren't supposed to lose.
Now I'm looking at the overall net rankings.
Yeah, I was too.
Okay.
At least that's what I Googled net rankings. I've got
Purdue sitting at number 4. How about the Big 12?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. That's what I just said.
Yeah, the Big 12, which has been that way in football and basketball in the last couple of years, but they've got Kansas, Texas, Iowa State, Arizona. That's Pac-12. But those 3 teams right there in a row, yeah. Kansas, Texas, at 8, 9, and
top
10.
17. Yes.
Then you go back. Well, then you go down to 15. You got Baylor, then Kansas State, then TCU. 3 more from 15 to 17.
Mm-hmm. All pocketed for some reason, which is kind of hilarious. Like they've got 6 and they're 3 on top of each other, and then 3 more on top of each other.
I've got Indiana at number 19.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see
Rutgers at 22, Ohio State at 24.
Yep.
Illinois at 31, Iowa at 38, Maryland at 45, Penn State at 48. Yeah, I mean it's they are pretty closely packed together. The Big 12 is probably going to get their 6 in. But
here's the funny thing is you got Wisconsin and Michigan are of 64 and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And those are 2, Wisconsin is currently sitting 1, 2, 3, 4th in the Big Ten at 12-5, which they're a bubble team right now.
Yeah, they're all bubble teams. The thing is, we're talking about all this. They can get 10, but like any of those 10 can go south. Like
now, Michigan at 11-8, boy, they've got some work to do. They're going to have to finish the conference strong.
Yeah, no, I mean, like there's, nobody outside of Purdue and possibly Rutgers are safe to the point that they could, really struggle down the stretch, and still get in. I mean, like, again, nobody outside of Purdue has more than 13 wins in the league. No one has better than 13 overall wins. Everybody's got at least, minimum 5 losses. Wisconsin's 12-5, has played fewer games than everybody else. Wisconsin's 12-5, Northwestern's 12-5. Nobody has a better record than that outside of Purdue. So like nobody is safe. Nobody is safe at all in the Big Ten. They're probably going to get a bunch in, and obviously going to play each other. So it's not like like someone's going to pile up some wins. They're not all going to be 10-10 or whatever. Someone's going to go on a run, and Indiana could beat that team, one of them. But nobody is safe, other than Purdue. Purdue is safely in. That's it. Other than that, no team in the Big Ten can say right now, like, you can't buy your tickets if you're anybody in the Big Ten other than Purdue.
Bill, how you doing, buddy? It's been a long time. Glad to see you back on. Something that I've been thinking about because of what's happened in two of the last three games, not just that, but throughout the season, the race for Big Ten Player of the Year had kind of gotten to the point where most people assumed, all right, Zach Edey's going to probably run away with this. Trace Jackson Davis is now saying, not so fast, my friend, because and I don't expect him to be able to maintain this level of play where he's scoring 30 points 2 out of 3 games, but he didn't have to. He's been playing extraordinarily well, and I think that what he has been doing has having a bigger impact on his team. He is playing like the player of the year to me, and I know that winning the Big Ten title will go into that for Purdue, but if Indiana continues to play like they are, they don't have to win the Big Ten championship, but they get up there and they finish second because of, and Trace Jackson continues to play like he has. I think Trace Jackson Davis is outplaying Zach Edey personally.
I mean, he would have to outplay Zach Edey head to head. That would be the difference. If they still have 2 games there, and if Edey wins those matchups, Edey wins the title, flat out, no doubt about it.
There's no way Edey can guard Trace Jackson Davis, though.
Yeah, but Trace has had a hard time guarding Edey. So,
well, who doesn't though?
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, like, Trace has to outperform him. You like, the only way that Trace wins the Big Ten Player of the Year is if you watch those two play together and you say Trace is the better player. Like, and that means beating him straight up. Like, Trace has to score more points, win the game. Like that, like, and if he does it, that's on the table. You know what I mean? So in a sense, Trace controls his own destiny for winning Player of the Year. But he's got to beat him, and that's not easy. I mean, like, again, like, and Trace is giving up how many, 7 inches? In size. And, I mean, like, last year, remember when they beat Purdue, a big part
and say that again. Race Thompson is Trace Jackson Davis is 6'9", and he's giving up 7 inches in this matchup.
Yeah, exactly. So Trace has to be able to go beat one-on-one straight up a 7'4" human being. That's what Big Ten Player of the Year is down to. If Trace can do that, he can win it. But he's got to do it. Like, there's no way if, like, no one is making a argument for Trace if he doesn't beat Edey straight up. And he probably has to do it twice. He probably has to do it twice. I don't think if they split, like, I mean, he has to outplay him both nights. Indiana doesn't have to win both nights, but Trace has to outplay Edey both nights. That's, and he's got to be pretty darn good the rest of the way. But, like, you have to clearly see Trace is the better player one-on-one against Zach Edey for Trace to win it. But
next up on
you're right. It's not out of the question. He's in a situation where if he does win, he can take it, but he has to beat Edey one-on-one straight up 2 nights.
Next up on the scoring list is Mike Woodson for Trace Jackson Davis to pass.
That's going to be cool.
Yeah, and he's currently tied with Jeff Newton for the all-time blocks leader in IU history. So he had 5 in the last game. So obviously he will become the all-time blocks leader in the game, unfortunately, on the road. Where do they play next? Minnesota? I think they play at the Barn. So unfortunately, there will not be any fanfare for him in that. But maybe they should try to work out a deal to stop the game and get the ball.
I'm sure they could do that. I'm sure they could.
But but he becomes the all-time blocks leader with his next block, and there's a lot of games left. He's gonna kind of blow by that record, and moving up the scoring list. It's a big deal. But the thing is, all those guys that he's passing all played on teams that either won a Big Ten championship, went to a Final Four.
they did something big, and that's the one thing that is missing from Trace Jackson Davis's resume.
Yeah, and there's a good chance that this team won't get as far. This isn't 92, the 92, 93 team, much less the 87, 81, et cetera team. And so Trace is not going to have one of those years that he can put up there and say, like, this was the great Trace team that, won a national championship or went to a Final Four. I mean, they probably won't. Again, obviously, it's a single elimination tournament. Anything can happen. And the way they're playing now, obviously, they're in a lot better shape. They could probably win some tournament games. It wouldn't be shocking if they're a Sweet 16 team to me. But I do think that, and I've gotten some of these debates on Twitter as to how Trace is going to be viewed long term. And I do think people are going to remember what all he went through, like the tumult of his period. Because Indiana fans have good memories. It's not like they don't remember, you really get in and talking to people that are IU fans, and they remember everybody in every situation and like what this team was all about, and what that team was all about, and where the program was at this point. Trace is going to be remembered fondly. I think we have this sense, well, like he's not going to have this legacy if he doesn't do this. He's going to have a great legacy at Indiana, even if this team doesn't go as far as he wants it to go. And he really cares and he wants it to. But I don't think it's going to be a situation where, like, if they barely make the tournament and lose, that people are going to view Trace as this empty stat producer. They're not. Like, Trace dragged this team as far as it could, is going to drag this team as far as it can go. And, he hung in there for 4 seasons, went through a coach firing, has had situations change drastically throughout his years, is losing, lost 2 other seniors for significant periods during his senior year, in Johnson and Thompson. So, like, this guy has accomplished a lot, and I don't think anyone's going to forget that long term.
No, absolutely not. And it'll be interesting to see what this team can do, because they will get Race Thompson back. Well, obviously he is back. Played in a limited role yesterday, more for I think that was more for mental, because he got a rousing round of applause when he came into the game, although he averaged a foul a minute almost. He had played 4 minutes and 3 fouls. So, which is something Malik Renew has to learn to do. He's got to learn to play without fouling, because he could be so important to this team, but he's another guy, buddy. He averages a foul a minute almost.
Yeah. No, it's God. I mean, like, that was the thing that really blew me away by that entire stat sheet. So the 3 power forwards, if you consider Renew a 4, and obviously he gets a lot of minutes to 5 too. But 13 fouls between Geronimo, Renew, and Thompson. 13 fouls, like almost at one position. 38 minutes, 13.
Yeah, and I was going to say, but actually, if you look and how quickly the fouls actually came, that was
unbelievable.
Somebody the other day, somebody had 3 fouls in 2 trips down the court.
It's incredible.
I don't know if it was that game or not. K-Bro voted Indiana number 25 on his top 25 ballot. I was wondering, that was a question I did have. I haven't asked that, but I was talking about the top 25 earlier. Who's going to be number 1? Who'd you vote number 1, K-Bro? That's curious question. But I expect Indiana to be back in the top 25 this week after they,
the way they play.
Straight Big
They
Ten
look
games.
like a top 25 team right now. And if you're searching for teams, and sometimes that's what you do when you fill. I've filled out these pools, and sometimes you get to the bottom and you're like, who belongs here? I don't even know. I don't have any idea. And I think Indiana was playing well enough that you could justify it to yourself for sure.
Well, you've got an Arkansas team that is 13-6, same record as Indiana, and then Arkansas. Haven't they lost 4 straight or 5 straight? So
something like that. They've been tumbling. I know that.
So there's definitely room for movement in the top 25. So I would definitely. It's funny how, as balanced as the Big Ten is, no Big Ten teams hardly in the top 25 now.
Yeah, to that point. I mean, like, again, there's nobody that you trust outside of Purdue.
Well, there's no one that I think these teams are getting better. and this league is getting better at the same time.
Yeah.
Indiana getting better at the same time, where Illinois, I don't know, they may be heading in the other direction. Someone commented yesterday that Michigan State, weren't a good team. I'm like, what are you, nuts? I think they're a really good team. They've got some really good players.
Yeah.
And Hauser, the defensive job Indiana did on Hauser in the second half. He had 14 first half points for Michigan State, but only 8 in the second half. Again, the defense coming on, but
yeah. I mean, the issue is though the Big Ten's got a lot of pretty good teams, and not, and Purdue's the only great team, and so there's a lot of pretty good, and you don't know.
Is Purdue a great team? I've had this discussion. I've said, and I get in trouble with Purdue fans because they think, you're biased.
Depends on
I'm not biased. I just don't think Purdue is a great team, and here's why. I don't think Purdue is a national championship winning team at this moment, and that is why I don't think they're a great team. That's it. I think they're really good. Maybe they can become that, but I don't think that they're a national championship caliber team right now where they can go through 6 games. You've got 2 freshman guards, and while Zach Edey is Mount Edey, he does, I'm sure that there's going to be someone who can figure out a defensive scheme that takes them out of what they want to do as well. If those guards were juniors, I would probably say, they're a legit shot, maybe the best shot to win the national championship, as a matter of fact. But I don't know that, Houston is, even though they lost a Temple of all teams, Kansas is, even though they've been getting boat raced. It's like what Indiana's gone through. You have to learn and understand these teams actually go through this stuff, and it's real, whether it's mental, whatever it is. But I think that there's too many teams that, and I'm like, okay, wow, is UCLA worthy of winning the national championship? Well, they've lost 2 in a row.
But to the point for Purdue, like if nobody's a great team, then they've got as good a chance of being a great team as anybody. They don't have to beat previous teams that won national championships. That's kind of a thing. Like every once in a while, you got a season like this where it's nobody, that nobody really stands out. You're like, okay, like you don't have to go back and beat like Gonzaga and Baylor 2021. Like you don't have to beat both of those teams. They're not in the league. They're not there. You don't have to go beat, a team with Jalen Suggs and Drew Timme. You don't have to go back and beat a team with Davion Mitchell and those guys. Like that, they're not there. They're elsewhere. They're not walking through that door. Like you have to beat the teams that are there. Like so can Kansas win it? Yeah, but are they beatable? Yeah, Kansas is beatable. Is Arizona beatable? Yes. Is UCLA beatable? Arizona just beat them, so they must be beatable. Like there's nobody, and Houston just lost to Temple, so they've got to be beatable. So that tells me like you don't have to be a great team to win this title. So like, can Purdue win it? I mean, like I think and again, I don't watch them enough that I have. Like I used to watch, obviously Purdue on a nightly basis and Indiana on a nightly basis, but like, those freshman guards are really good. And they play like they're older. I think that's the one big thing is those guys play like they're older. They don't,
and they will be older by the time the tournament rolls around.
Yeah, exactly. You're practically a sophomore by the time you get to the tournament. And again, they play like older players. And like I think Braden Smith was fully aware that like, okay, like you're going to have to play with maturity if you're going to get on the floor. Like you're not a raw athlete that's going to be able to just get by on that kind of juice. Like you've got to be a really smart basketball player, and he has been. He's been terrific, and Warrior has been the same. And so those guys have played years beyond themselves. So like experience is not going to be an issue for those two. Like they're going to play like they are experienced. So I think they're going to be fine with that. It's just I don't know that if you manage to settle down Edey, and you put, like you force Smith and Lawyer into like ISO positions where it's like they've got the ball at the top of the key and somebody's got to make a play. Like they don't have that Carson Edwards juice. They can just go get you one, and like that's you find yourself in that position in the tournament too frequently that it's like, all right, like they're going to cut off everything else you want to do. It's just get your point guard in an ISO, run on high ball screen for him, and he's got to make a play. Like he's got to get a bucket. Do you feel good about that in that situation if you're Purdue? I don't know if you feel great about it, but you got a large human being that you could just fling the ball into, and maybe he can get one from 5 feet out, and he's always got a possibility of it. So, I don't know. They've got as good a chance as anybody. I would say. Like, again, there's nobody that you look at and say, well, they're really good. Like I'll there's nobody you look at for Purdue and say, well, if they get that team, they're out. I don't look at it that way. So, like it is a year where it is up for grabs, and Purdue has every right to be the team that gets it compared to anybody else.
And that's why we love it. That's why they play the games, and it's the greatest sporting event that there is, the NCAA tournament. Just like Dustin Dopirak is the greatest writer in the history on the planet with the Indy Star.
We'll take it.
Looking forward to. I'm trying to set up a time to come visit for
come watch the Pacers.
Well, I'm trying to set that up. And
wait till Tyrese comes back. Don't bother until he's back. Just wait.
But when's he going to be back?
Beginning of February. Can't be too much longer. He's walking around just fine, and he's telling everybody about his Brock Purdy jersey. He's gonna be fine.
Actually, I'm shooting for February 2nd.
There you go. Go for it.
The Lakers.
Go do it.
Yeah, I will. But I will let you know. But looking forward to it. Cannot thank you enough, brother.
Appreciate it, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Hey, make sure you give Dustin Dopirak a follow from the Indy Star and all of his coverage of the Pacers. But of course, he's been on the beats for many, many other sports teams as well, including the Indiana Hoosiers, amongst others. We got lots more coming up here on Indiana Sports Beat, brought to you by our good friends from Cabello Restaurant, a part of the Endeavor Hospitality network of fine restaurants in and around Bloomington. Cabello, located on the square, allows you to taste the taste and traditions of Southern Italy right here in Southern Indiana. Stop by Cabello, located on the square, and they're a part of the Endeavor Hospitality Wow Club. Back with more Indiana Sports Speed Radio right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. If you're looking for
Okay, Johns.
I've got excuse me. I've got everything you need.
Woody,
Trey Galloway, Trace Jackson Davis, Tamar Bates, and I even threw in a little Bob Bostad in there.
What do you have from Trey Galloway? My question?
Your question.
Beautiful.
Same with Woody. And Trace is Rick Bozich's question, which is basically asking how things have changed. And Tamar Bates is a silly little question about his daughter winning the halftime race.
You shouldn't say silly.
Well, I don't say silly in a negative way. I just say it silly as in it's not a serious question.
Fun question, right? That's what you meant to say. Fun.
Yeah.
Perfect. Beautiful. That's beautiful. What is that, velvet?
And you could still take one more break too, about halfway between now and 10:40. So take one around 10:30.
I got to get that stupid thing back. Roadcaster. I'm gonna have to learn how to use that. I'll learn. I'll plug it into this computer. I don't think I've ever tried to plug it into this one. I've got to figure out how to record stuff on it, like quick little sound clips. You know what I'm saying? That way I can do it, and that stuff you don't have to worry about, because if it's something that comes to my mind, I can go boom. I think it would make the show better. What do you mean Don's right? How about Jim? Jim said it first.
You're way
Come
back
on,
in
Andy.
the comments, I think you're way behind in the comments.
I'm at the bottom.
Oh
my God. No, see, it just refreshed again. See, it refreshes.
I don't know why people would be sending comments about Don.
Dude, it refreshes.
Unless it was an hour ago is what I'm saying.
It says, I'd like to know how DeCourcy had IU out of the tournament, even after the Whiskey moved them back in 11. Well,
There we go.
ask
New
that
brews
question.
and will be offered in all Endeavor Hospitality restaurants. Come taste with Dr. Hops' Brewing, Metalworks Brewing Company. Bring your passion and your thirst.
This segment is brought to you by Courtroom Sports Grill in Bedford. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you here on this Monday, brought to you by the fine folks from Courtroom Sports Grill down in Bedford, a part of the Endeavor Hospitality Wild Club, but stop by Courtroom Sports Grill. Great Cajun cuisine. Great place to take the family for dinner, go for lunch, stop in and watch a game. Make sure you're join the Wild Club as well. Start earning Wild Awards today. Some comments. Andy says Indiana's been able to overcome some slow starts and respond to other opponents' runs, passion, but also composure. Really awesome to see. Minnesota will test focus because they are expected to win. And it's on the road again. The Illinois game was the first, it was a road game, but it was the first game coming off of that new look that they had, so that they still had that. Yesterday, they started the game kind of not quite there. They let Michigan State take them out of it a little bit, but they regained their composure quickly and did what they needed to do. Howie says if you rewatch Cops dunk, keep an eye on Malik clearing the way. Well, that would make sense. So, I mean, I'm not trying to. Have you ever seen Miller Kopp do that before? Someone would have to clear the way, I'd say. But it looked good. It looked aggressive, I guess. Andy says, I know that he's on tomorrow regarding Mike DeCourcy, but he'd like to know how he had IU out of the tournament even after the Wisconsin win, moved them back into an 11 spot, but still seems pretty off. You can't go by that stuff week to week because, and I mean, I'm not answering for Mike, but it's the aggregate. They're looking at it differently than you are. Number one, you're looking at it from a fan perspective and a fan perspective only, and fans want instant gratification for their teams. These guys are not. They couldn't care less. They just look at the overall body of work. They don't see an impressive. They see the win. It doesn't mean as much to them as it does to you, but that stuff will take care of itself. Indiana is a tournament team. They will have to fall apart to not be a, I don't know, a 7 seed. I think they end up a 7 seed. And then at the worst, I think they could go higher. It depends on how they decide to play. They determine their own fate. They determine it by how well they play. We've seen that. We've seen them turn around. We've seen them go from the 3-game losing streak and how they played to what they've been doing here of late. And that has mostly been between the ears. A change in mental outlook, a change in aggression. I mean, this is not the team that got punked at Rutgers. This is not the team that got punched in the face by Arizona. This is not the team that got punched in the gut by Kansas. My only question is, because they lost Xavier and they looked a little shell-shocked at Kansas, which it's understandable. That's a tough environment. But the fact that Mike used that word shell-shocked, and it was appropriate. They did look shell-shocked. They didn't know what to do. But that wasn't the first time. My only question is, well, what if something like that happens again? Are they learning from these experiences to not be shell-shocked when something happens and to be able to take it in stride and just continue to work past it? Or do they become shell-shocked again? That's going to be a huge difference for this team because, things always happen. You hope not, but that's the case. They do. Checking out some other we've got, let's see. Speaking of comments, I asked Mike Woodson yesterday about what's changed. This team lost 3 in a row. Now, not only have they won 3 in a row, but they're doing it differently. Here's what Mike had to say.
Well, guys, when you lose 2 starters, and I go back to the Iowa game, you lose 2 starters, it's a shell shock to everybody. And especially when you got to depend on the Maliks and the CJs and Jalen, who's never played at this level a long period of time. And that's where we were. I'm not using it as an excuse. Those guys, mentally we were smacked in the face. And, we started to go into the tailspin. I mean, the only way to get out of a tailspin, I've always believed this as a coach, you got to work your way out of it. So practice became even harder. And I became more demanding. I wanted more. We needed more. And we responded in the Wisconsin game, and it's been a nice carryover in Illinois and now today. So that's kind of where we are.
Yep, that's kind of exactly where they are, and but they're working their way out of it. Trey Galloway, who has risen to become one of the answers to the problems, as the injury to Xavier has forced him into the starting role, but he is not only adapting to that, but playing pretty well. 17 points yesterday for Indiana in the win over Michigan State, but it wasn't just that. As I look across, he was 3 of 3 from deep. We talked about earlier that his shooting percentage being high, much like we talk about Miller Kopp, but at least Trey takes some shots, needs to take a few more. He was 4 of 4 at the free throw line. He had 3 assists. He had 1 personal foul. That's a lot of action in 35 minutes. That's a hell of a day. That's a hell of a day. And he has stepped into that role. That's the mark of a good team. Tamar Bates, once you start getting him that consistently from him, that's going to make Indiana a dangerous team. Jalen Hood-Schifino's consistency is up and down right now. That's the difference between Indiana being, a really good team. Miller Kopp, I guess he's just going to bring what he brings, and offensively, you just don't count on anything, because if he could, again, that would just make this a more dangerous team. When you add more weapons, then you make it much easier for Trace Jackson Davis to do what he needs to do. And having guys hit 8 of 9 from behind the arc yesterday, well, that's not going to allow you to double team Trace Jackson Davis. You're going to have to guard the perimeter. And so now if you've got guys knocking shots down and you're leaving Trace Jackson Davis one-on-one with him playing like he's playing right now, nobody's stopping him but him. So that makes this a very good team. It is a good team. They determine whether or not they're a good team, their level of play. And you got to give them credit for coming back. Trey Galloway, one of those guys that has led this. And don't forget, he is an Indiana guy. He was from Indiana. He's one of the few on this roster. But I asked him the same question I asked Woody. What has been the change, the difference for this team in between the 3-game losing streak and the 3-game winning streak? Here's what Trey Galloway had to say.
Yeah, I think we kind of just looked ourselves in the mirror and just we knew what we had to do, and it was play defense and play harder. I think just getting back to what we did last year, we were really good defensively last year, and we watched some of those games and we saw some of that. But I think obviously it's a new team, but we had to go back to our principles and what Coach Woodson preaches, and that's defense. And we weren't doing that in those losses, and now we're finally kind of coming together and playing harder on the defensive end, and it's leading to more offense since we're getting stops. So.
And at the end there, you heard Tamar's daughter basically saying, "Hey, what about me? I won the race. I won the baby race."
I did see that she took the dub, comeback win, and it was really just because she was ready to get picked up. I think she was crying the whole time, but we'll take it. First competition ever, so she's undefeated.
I love that. She's undefeated. That was pretty funny. Trace Jackson Davis talked about the change in this team as well, and what they've been experiencing over the last 3 games. Here's what he had to say.
I just think that we finally got acclimated to the new unit that we had in, and honestly, we're just playing for each other, and that's the biggest thing for us. Like I said about JG, he didn't have a great game today, but Malik came in and he stepped up, and that's what we got to do. Guys have started to step up, and we just got to continue. And then Race came back, so that's good. We're going to try to get him in, and with X hopefully coming back here soon, we just got to keep rolling, and guys have got to keep stepping up. So.
There was Trace Jackson Davis talking about what the change in Indiana's game. Hey, we got more coming up. We got to take a quick break, here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
All right. And when we get back, you only need to fill about 6-7 minutes. Excuse me.
How about that?
That was a good little segment with clips right there.
Yep.
And I still have Bob Bostad if you want to bring any football into it, but don't feel like you have to.
I'm not. I don't want to say this out loud, but do you see that number?
Yep. No worries.
Gosh damn, I wish we could do the 9 to 11.
I honestly don't think that has anything to do with it, because there was people waiting before we even started at 8:45.
I know, but it's still always bigger. There would be more. Okay, I didn't even know. Updated. Oh, damn it. Remind me, please, tomorrow to talk to Mike DeCourcy about the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame vote.
Okay.
Because Scott Rowland is on it.
You want me to ask K-Bro if he wants to come on tomorrow? Since we
that would be great. That would be great.
K-Bro, if you're listening, feel free to, message me your response. Or if not, I'll just reach out to you in a little bit. Or just put in the comments. I'll come on tomorrow.
K-Bro. He needs his own intro song. Purdue #1 in the AP poll, probably.
I think did the poll just come out? Let's take a look.
Is it out yet?
So let's see. An hour ago, it looks like. Let's take or is this is a power rankings? This isn't the same thing. No, I don't know that it's out yet. Nope, not yet. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be Purdue. Is Purdue the only one-loss? No, Charleston's a one-loss team, and so is Florida Atlantic. Oh, that's
Nobody cares. Dusty Moore?
Who's the head coach of FAU?
Dusty May.
Yeah, they're 19-1, number 24 in the country. This is of last week, as of last week.
Oh, we got to get him back on.
All right, here we go.
Stone Restaurant provides delicious 5-star comfort food with a Southern charm at 2-star prices. Southern Stone Restaurant is part of Endeavor Hospitality's Wow Club.
This segment is brought to you by Bubba's 33 in Clarksville. Pizza, burgers, beer. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back. Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Monday. I hope you had a great weekend. Plenty going on as college basketball. Let's see, you have the NFL playoffs. A little surprised with I can't say you're surprised that the Bengals won because they were in the Super Bowl last year, but going to Buffalo, shuffling off to Buffalo, winning in Buffalo-like conditions, which not that Cincinnati is an exact tropical paradise. It gets cold there as well, but a little surprising, but it shows the maturity of Joe Burrow. I mean, what a pickup that is. You talk about something the Colts need desperately. You need a guy like Joe Burrow, but he's Cool Hand Luke. He just has that personality that's just not too high, not too low. We'll see how they do. Dusty May, John pointed out. Is that right? 19-1, ranked number 24 in the AP.
That's as of last. Let me see if I can get an updated record, but that was as of last week's top 25 poll.
Well, that doesn't matter. I don't care when it was. If it was last year, they'd won 8. They're 19-1, but they won 18 in a row.
So they lost their second game?
See, I'm trying to go back.
Yeah, they're still 19-1. So I guess they haven't played since it was 2 days ago they played. So yeah, they got Middle Tennessee coming up, Western Kentucky coming up. They must be leading the Conference USA they're in?
Are they at too damn bad they don't play at Western Kentucky.
Nope.
I'd like to have gone down and seen that game. They probably already have because I don't have their entire schedule.
They only play them once, and it's at home. Or no, hold on. Excuse me. They did play them. They played them at WKU and won 76-62.
When was that?
That was back on January 16th, not too long ago.
I don't know why I'm not getting the whole freaking schedule. I want the whole schedule, man. I want the whole thing. Yeah, they lost their second game of the season to Ole Miss. To Ole Miss, no doubt. At Ole Miss in Oxford. And they they lose by 13. So that's it was probably a close game. It got away from them at the end. But then guess what they did next?
They beat Florida on the road.
They beat Florida in the mini swamp. They beat Detroit Mercy with the all-time leading 3-point shooter in NCAA history, Antoine Davis.
They whooped them, beat them by 21.
South Alabama. Kane Womack, not on the coaching staff there, unfortunately, to help their defense. Let's see. Just UAB. They won a tight one there.
UAB, I believe, is the other favorite to win the CUSA. So if they're the best of those two, then they're likely trying to get that Conference USA title.
They've won games in overtime and beat Texas El Paso.
How about that for old Dusty May?
Hell yeah. We got to get Dusty back on, man. I'm going to send him a text here. That's freaking awesome.
1 minute.
Freaking awesome. But yeah, I want to get Dusty on. Let's see. I was trying to think who else would need to get on here soon, but we'll get a bunch of people on. But looking forward to tomorrow, of course. Mike DeCourcy will join us. And let's see, Chronic Hoosier as well. We'll reach out to see what K-Bro's doing as Dustin's on assignment again this week. Major League Baseball Hall of Fame vote coming up. Scott Brolin getting in. We'll talk about that tomorrow and a lot more. Dusty May's got Florida Atlantic at 19-1, and Indiana's got another game coming up Wednesday or this week. So plenty to get to, man. We appreciate everybody on the program today. Big thanks to, of course, Don Fischer, the voice of the Hoosiers. As always, Dustin Dopirak from Indianapolis Indy Star. Big thanks to those guys. Thanks to John, the producer, for keeping us between the white lines. Most importantly, thanks to you all. Without you, we have no reason to be here, and we are grateful that you are each and every day. Make sure if you're listening to us on radio, great. Keep the dial tuned to each and every one of those stations, whether it's the Ref in Evansville, WBRO in Marengo, or soon to be WJOB in Hammond and the region. Or if you're on YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe and like button. But until tomorrow, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.